host, Dr. Wolfula, and when I'm not solving a puzzle box that sends me straight to hell, aka my mother-in-law's house, I'm here at the Wolfula reviewing movies. It's been nearly 7 years since the last Hellraiser film, Revelations, was released, which of course means that Dimension needs to pump out another ultra-low-budget, low-quality, direct-to-video Hellraiser sequel so they can retain the rights to the franchise, even though they have no intentions of ever making an actual Hellraiser film with any effort put into it. Oh, those Weinstein brothers sure built a solid company that's currently desperately clawing at what's left of their film catalog. Maybe they'll find some way to rudely awaken Wes Craven from his eternal slumber just to give us Scream 5. I wouldn't put it past those sneaky bastards. So anyway, Dimension's latest scheme, film, is Hellraiser Judgment. And, you know, I'd be remiss not to pass judgment on this film. No one who's ever lived is funnier than me. Hellraiser Judgment is the 10th film in the series that not even Clive Barker's butthole is involved with, apparently. To tell you the truth, I haven't seen many Hellraiser films beyond the classic original, but I should change that. Maybe there are some other gems starring Pinhead and his Cenobite pals, but Judgment certainly isn't one of them. It barely feels like a Hellraiser flick most of the time. I'm gonna be upfront here. This movie is only 81 minutes long, just barely full length by Screen Actors Guild standards, which is 80 minutes by the way. 6 minutes of which are opening/closing credits, and another 12 minutes of which are spent on the opening itself, which has very little to do with the actual plot of the film. Funnily enough, the opening scene actually has Pinhead lamenting that his methods are becoming out of date in a technological world.
In an age when desire has become amplified, but where lust can be sated electronically, we need something more than just a wooden box.
There is a mechanism. The house is ready. We can adapt.
The Cenobites just can't keep up with the advanced sinning going on in the world today. The film might as well have included Pinhead having a conversation with his doctor about ED medication. It would have had the same exact effect.
Technology may have advanced, but sin remains unchanged, pure.
What does Pinhead complaining about kids not liking his wooden puzzle boxes in a world of apps have to do with the plot? Nothing. You would think that the flick would have some kind of technological theme to it based on Pinhead's opening monologue. Like he has eyes to grow a ponytail and found an upstart in Silicon Valley, spreading his lament configuration to the iPhones of millions of millennials, but nope. I'm honestly baffled by the whole thing.
So many souls seeking new and darker experiences. Degradation upon degradation, sin after sin.
So then those are the souls we shall seek out first.
The rest of the 12-minute opening isn't that important to the story. It mostly just establishes the process of going to hell, which isn't all that necessary, considering it's shown again later, but doesn't really work out the second time. Still, I'll break down the fucking nutty process of being admitted into hell. It'll probably come in handy when you die, you sick fuck. So, this vagrant child killer that looks a lot like Dan Harmon receives the most crumpled-looking letter you could possibly imagine that invites him to a house with vague details. Oh, and the dude decides to go to the dilapidated house at night. Of course, it doesn't work out to his favor. Damn it, I thought just once I could see a character in a movie go to a spooky house via an anonymous invitation and have things turn out swell. It would have given me some hope about some of these Tinder hookups. So Dan Harmon is tied to a wheelchair in what is essentially the entrance to hell. Hell looks a lot like an abandoned meth lab. Well, I guess a meth lab with no meth is its own kind of hell. When you go to hell, you're greeted by the Auditor, basically Satan's accountant, who looks like a white Morpheus that got into a fight with his cat and who audits your sins.
So let's just dive in, shall we?
Yes, apparently hell functions a lot like the IRS, which makes sense, I guess. Still not as cool and hardcore as I would have hoped. I mean, are we going to see Satan's attorney next?
Let's save ourselves the time and you the considerable pain by answering the questions honestly. Clearly, this is a place where the rules of your world do not apply.
Anywho, the Auditor types up all of Dan's sins on a typewriter. What, Satan couldn't spring for an HP Pavilion and a printer? Cheap asshole. Here's where things get a little more abstract. A sweatier version of Bam Margera's dad waltzes in and pours children's tears onto the sin pages. The sweaty fuck then proceeds to dine on the salty, wet sheets of paper and almost immediately vomits into a funnel, which filters into a trough that topless, faceless women put their hands in for some reason. This is pretty much the peak of this film, and it's not scary or disturbing. It's just fucking gross. The Hellraiser series always seemed really fetishistic, but this is the worst fetish I've ever seen. It gets weirder. Then, while Dan Harmon is tied up to a table, a bunch of topless middle-aged women enter the room and tear his clothes off with their mouths, or something. I don't know. It's fucking weird, okay? It's fucking weird. Finally, a guy in a baby mask walks in, and from within this dude jumps out an S&M gas mask guy that cuts up Dan's skin. Wait, is that a ponytail? God, lame. Oh yeah, the faceless chicks are also sprayed with black sludge or whatever. Okay, that was just the opening, and it's fucking nutty, but the rest of the movie is, either good or not, a lot more conventional. The plot concerns a serial killer called the Preceptor, nerdiest serial killer name I've ever heard, whose murders are inspired by the 10 Commandments. Oh wow, a killer whose methods are derived from biblical principles. Now where have I heard that before? I know there was a number in the title. Oh, I got it now. Too Fast, Too Furious. Love that movie. Anyway, hot on the Preceptor's tail are two detectives, and I really wish the older one was black because it would have totally completed this film. The two detectives are actually brothers, Sean the eldest and David.
What was that like?
A Tale of Two Cities?
A what?
Charles Dickens.
Right. Like anyone reads that shit anymore?
It's the most popular fictional book on the planet.
To mix things up, they're joined by a female detective named Christine, whose only real function is to keep the guys on track.
Fluorescence, give me a migraine.
Look, I know that me coming in here must be a bit of a shock. Detective teams are tight-knit at the best of times. But I do know this job.
You can also tell that these characters are detectives because the word detectives is written on the door of their office at the police station. Nobody else is shown at the police station, though, especially their superiors, because that would cost money. You can't make a Hellraiser sequel with actual money. Cocaine is the only acceptable currency. Oh yeah, the Preceptor, he's killing people. It's fucked up, I guess, but what does it have to do with the Cenobites? Well, from what I could tell, Pinhead and his crew are only incidentally involved in the Preceptor plot. One of the victims is linked to Carl Watkins, the Dan Harmon guy that accidentally went to hell earlier, and Sean manages to find out Watkins' last known location and also accidentally goes to hell. Man, the Cenobites don't even have to try anymore.
If I had to guess, I stumbled into a painful, possibly fatal situation, the agenda of which you'll soon tell me.
But somehow, Sean manages to escape hell, like off camera with one of the puzzle boxes.
There's no need to go after him. He'll be back.
Yeah, okay, so now Sean has to try to solve the mystery of the Preceptor while also dealing with, I guess, Cenobites watching him fuck his wife or whatever. I don't know.
What is going on? What are you doing?
The plot of Hellraiser Judgment is derivative, but at the same time, very muddled and unfocused. It felt like David and Christine looking for the Preceptor and Sean dealing with Cenobite visions were totally separate plot threads that only happen to converge quickly right at the end due to lazy coincidence. The film doesn't juggle the A and B plots all that well, so both the Preceptor and Cenobites feel underdeveloped, but ultimately, if I'm watching a Hellraiser sequel, I want Cenobites more than anything, and this film disappoints in that category. Doug Bradley, the original Pinhead, once again refused to participate in this Hellraiser sequel because he'd have to sign a non-disclosure agreement just to read the screenplay. That is not a good sign. I will say that Bradley's newest replacement, Paul T. Taylor, is much better than the previous Pinhead in Revelations and is pretty decent in the role, but he doesn't really do much and barely appears in the film at all.
Evil seeks evil.
Pinhead mostly just chills out. I can't really blame him at this point with this kind of material. Instead, the hell guy you see the most of in this movie is the Auditor. Funny story about the Auditor. He's actually a new character played by the director Gary J. Tunnicliffe, who was actually a longtime effects artist for the Hellraiser series prior. The only reason why the director plays the Auditor is because the budget of this film was really low. Bottom of the barrel. Tunnicliffe could show up before the shoot days would start and save time/ cash money by being the guy in makeup for the day. I will say this, though. I actually kind of like the Auditor and Gary J. Tunnicliffe's performance in his film, despite him not having acting experience.
Man of impeccable taste, apparently.
The Auditor honestly may have been my one highlight from the film.
Since you've been good enough not to waste our time with the usual drudgery of who are you and save me, etc., perhaps the reward is in order.
I really dig that European accent, and he has this light, humorous demeanor to him that made him grow on me.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Heavens, no. Same city, completely different zip code.
Really brightens up what's otherwise a dull film. I just wish Tunnicliffe could have delivered a script to match his performance. I wouldn't mind seeing the Auditor return in a more legitimate sequel. As for the other Cenobites, well, much like Pinhead, they barely appear or get to do much of anything. You know, when a horror movie has a weak script, you hope that it could at least fall back on some cool stuff like the makeup effects, but by and large, Judgment's effects just seem slapdash, even though there's very little anyway. Like fan-favorite Cenobite, the Chatterer, makes a couple of brief appearances, but his teeth don't even chatter. The top and bottom teeth never touch each other, but the sound effect still plays as if they do. Like the sound editor was really hoping it wasn't too noticeable. The Chatterer is supposed to chatter. That's the only thing that you need to get right. This Hellraiser sequel is also light on torture and gore, instead opting for probably much cheaper gross-out gags involving vomit, spit, sweaty fat dudes, yeah, that sort of thing. It's not really what I want to see in any kind of movie, like at all. Yuck! I will say that the actual human performances are serviceable for what it's worth. The actors do the best they can with what they have. I feel like the characters and their individual stories themselves are just weak, though. I'd say the worst is probably David. His character just feels like a sidekick most of the time, and he's the only dude that dresses like he's an LA noir.
Wonderful. Yeah. I had a great time last night, thank you for asking.
Sean is the main character, but his storyline loses steam as soon as he escapes hell, which is crazy to say about a guy who escapes from hell. You'd think he'd get more interesting after that shit, but no. The flick sets up some complex interpersonal relationships that Sean has with characters like his brother David and his estranged wife Allison, as well as setting up a troubled veteran backstory.
You were a man protecting his country. You were permitted to carry out these acts. But what were you permitted to feel?
None of these aspects of Sean's character get a chance to grow beyond their introductions, though.
Happy birthday to me.
Like, I didn't even realize until the end that Sean and David were supposed to be literal brothers. I thought they were just talking about a brothers-in-arms kind of thing. I mean, how often are brothers assigned to be partners on a police force anyway? Wouldn't that be like a conflict of interest? Oh, also, Heather Langenkamp appears in the flick as a landlady, but it's only one scene that's barely more than a cameo, but of course, she's fourth billed in the credits. How misleading.
Honey, with what those boys are doing in there, no windows ain't a bad thing.
Spoiler time. Gonna be talking about the ending quite a bit, so if you're sensitive about that kind of thing, skip to the time code to hear my final verdict. Sean and, Christine, Christine, get a tip-off on the Preceptor's hideout from the last known location stored on the victim's iPhone, but...
So we managed to power the thing up. When we did, turns out she was using a GPS app.
Wouldn't the phone be locked?
I mean, that's an iPhone 7. I still got a 4.
Didn't it cost the FBI nearly $1 million to hack an iPhone 5C? Oh, whatever. It's just a glaring plot hole. Maybe the coroner who still has an iPhone 4 spent $1 million off camera. Anyway, the location is an abandoned warehouse. Man, with all the abandoned warehouses in movies, the economy is worse off than I feared. Sean and Christine eventually stumble upon the Preceptor's secret murder room, which is mostly empty, save for a few newspaper clippings and pictures covering the walls sparsely. Hey, the production designer tried their hardest with the budget available to them. Of course, this turns out to be a double cross as Sean goes all Chris Brown on Christine. You see, as David so cleverly deduced from taking a Bible quote that Sean once said and then Googling it, searching it, he discovers on not Wikipedia that it's a quote from the Hebrew Bible that's called Preceptor. Really, if this murder investigation was a history report, David would have gotten an F.
Quite the detective.
So, why did Sean decide to become a holy crusader, murdering people through Bible teachings? Well, Sean's brother David fucked his wife, and, that's pretty much it.
No, we...
I can't blame him. It's better than going to couples counseling. Fuck that. So Sean forces his brother and wife to solve the puzzle box at gunpoint, which is pretty much the only way you'd ever get me to attempt a Rubik's Cube. The puzzle box makes the room bluer with, chains, fog, and shit. Hey, the Cenobites need their dangling chains. It really builds atmosphere. Sean tries to barter for his soul in exchange for the two adulterers, but that's not how hell works, apparently.
But it is a separate faction who has want of you, and there is no bargaining to be done.
Foiled again! So, Sean is pretty much screwed, or in Pinhead's case, nailed. But he's rescued by Jafil, an angel, and apparently angels in the Hellraiser universe wear white leather pantsuits. Very, very comfortable.
He was found guilty.
Let him go. There are matters at play here that are part of a bigger plan, and he is a part of it.
You see, apparently God is crooked and likes serial killers because they make people like him more or whatever. I didn't realize God was so insecure. I can relate.
He wants his flock afraid of the wolf so that they look toward the light.
So, Sean is set free by Pinhead, only to be immediately killed by Christine. Yeah, even though Christine was repeatedly pistol-whipped and should have a fucked-up-looking head at least, she just has a bit of blood on her face. Makes total sense. Jafil is pissed, though, but Pinhead has had enough of this bitch and tears the angel's head apart. Oh shit, she's gonna go to double heaven after that. Pinhead, I guess, pisses God off, so God punishes him with banishment to the only place worse than hell, Earth, as a regular mortal. And I guess he had a run-in with the same cat that fucked up the Auditor's face. Yeah, that's how the movie ends. I can't wait to see what kind of wacky adventures that human Pinhead will be up to in the even lower budget sequel that will come out in 9 years. Oh, also some German Mormons go inside an Auditor house in a post-credit scene.
And it isn't even a Tuesday.
Aw, man, I was really hoping to see Nick Fury. So, that was Hellraiser Judgment. Not as bad as Revelations, as this was made by a guy who's actually been heavily involved in the series, but the low budget and nonsensical script really hold it back from being the true Hellraiser sequel fans have been waiting for. Judgment is just another slapdash effort to retain the rights to a once beloved series. It's a sight I would not want to show anyone. I give Hellraiser Judgment an S&M gas mask guy out of Baby Mask Butcher. How's that for Judgment?
No.